going back, but I still haven't managed to get this part into here. I just wanted to make a note. I'm currently trying to get this black piece of plastic to go down this very small slot here, so I thought I'd just see where it goes in the light lens. Now, I don't know if you can notice on here, the part is chamfered slightly on this edge and this edge. Thus, if you try and put it in that way round, it will not fit. So we need to end up with a piece of material in here with a piece of plastic. Now, from what I understand, the piece of plastic goes down through the little hole there and actually sits between the two LEDs. So therefore you need to make sure you get this part, and you can feel a slight difference in it that way around. I don't know if you can see that goes in nice and flush. If I tip it out and try and put it the other way, it just does not want to go. Now you could force it, but you'd be screwed. So this needs to go that way, and the 2mm is literally to go down through the actual diffuser, the actual light cluster, and down and actually separate between the two LEDs. Even though the two LEDs are in their own chamber, I think they want you to be able to get a piece of this poking out of here enough that you end up with two LEDs. Now, for me, I think it would be nice if this slot was bigger and this went all the way down the diffuser and stuck out by there, so that the light is completely separated all the way up this piece of plastic, so that when it's in here, these two chambers would then be completely separate. Now obviously you're going to get a bit of light bleed where they're still moulded as one part. Maybe ServoNaut need to look at it and actually just break these two parts in half, allow you to insert enough of this material so that once you end up through the LED hole like that and come up flush, you just trim it flush with the lens, and then you end up with a nice separation of this part here. I'll just use my blade down the hole here to pull it out. Could then potentially be two parts, and you wouldn't have this stress of trying to get this in. So the other one here that you end up putting in this part, which is silver on one side and not on the other, so it's silver here and not there, that would end up going in there first again, so we need to check that fits. That fits nicely in there. Then you'd end up with a piece of plastic sticking out. Now on top of that piece of plastic sticking out, you then need to insert this part. Now this part does have, I don't know if you can see it, is on here there is a rounded edge compared to a flat edge, and then the two lights outlets are here and here. So this ideally needs to drop into here. Now that's got to drop into here with a piece of plastic sticking up, so I'm guessing the plastic needs to be flush with the top of here, but as I said, descend into the hole to separate the two LEDs. So we end up with that on top of there. Again, this feels tight, so let me just try this the other way around. There you go, it goes in a lot better that way around. And I only turned it over so the curved part is still to the curved part. And as you can see, there is now enough gap between this shoulder here and that edge there for, just pop this down, one of these. And these are both the same, they are reversible. Again, one side is painted and the other side is not, so you really want the painted side down, close to the diffuser as possible. So that you can, I don't know if you can see, it's sort of at that side and then clear all the way through, and the paint's on the other side, so we want that to pop into here. Now it's quite a nice fit, because once that's in, you end up with that nice curve there, and then we'll end up, because that needs to sit underneath this lens as where the other part sits on top, so we will end up with that. So I'm going to persevere getting the plastic down through this lens here. That needs to pop into here, so it will only go in one way. If I can't get it, I may try cutting the part into two halves and actually just putting a larger piece of plastic down between the two and actually removing a piece of material, but I want to try and assemble it how ServoNaut have designed it, but unfortunately they've designed this little opening here. As I said, because it's going in this way, I need to insert them into this way. I have shaved this plastic down several times, and it really is a tight fit. There you go. I've put so much pressure on the plastic, I've actually bent it and now broken it. So that needs to go into here. My fingers are really struggling with this, and I can't get it to go in. It'd be interesting to. I've not seen anybody else assemble these kits anywhere, and they are fairly new. I think the plastic is still too thick, but that really just needs to go in and poke out a couple of mil. So as I say, so this ends up down that hole there, actually down there, down between those LEDs. So if you leave too much material sticking out, it's going to push the plastic part up high and you won't get them in. So when you do these, you might be doing it, if you do get it to go in, it might be worth putting it in a bit at a time, because you need that to go down between those two LEDs and stick through there. Right, I am going to go off camera and persevere with this, and hopefully once I get it in one part, I shall show you how I got it in the other part, because I need to get it in here as well as here, and I'll be back in a minute. Okay, I'm back. So what I've actually ended up doing was getting my ruler and cutting is actually about 2.9 millimeters, just under 3 millimeters off the strip of this, which is the offcut, because we've still got all this material here, so we may need another one. Whilst I had a long strip, I laid it on the bench here and basically shaved off all the burrs which are on all four sides, and shaved it down a little bit. I don't know if you can see that actually just takes it off. And then what I did is I literally at 45 degrees to the end, I put a little tiny bit there and there and there, just to get rid of the shoulders, so we end up with that part. That then gave me enough room to be able to get this that far, which is all I can get it. I could maybe get it a little further in to there. As I say, they say to leave it sticking out by about 2 mil, so what you want to do is make sure your part is in here straight, because you could push it in and it could be off like that. So make it sure it's nice in there, nice and straight. Thus. Then, holding on to this part, I would cut about 3 millimeters off. Like that. As I say, this needs to drop down through this hole and separate those two LEDs. So I'm hoping this is going to be too long, and we should see that when it pops into here, you can see here, if you can see that that's sitting probably about a millimetre too high. So what we can do is lift that out, bring it round to here. Sorry if my head gets in the way, but I'm trying to do this. And literally we've just sliced off probably about 3/4 of a millimetre. So now if I pop this into here, you can see, I don't know if you can see, that's just sitting slightly proud. Now being that the plastic needs to go in a little bit more, what we can do is just give this a little press, holding the back, and that is now in there flush. So you need that much sticking out. Now the instructions say roughly 2 millimeters. If you want to know how big this actually is, that's closer to 3 millimeters. I'm sorry I did that upside down, I know, but my ruler measures that way. So you can see that's about 3 millimeters. If I try it with my depth gauge, there you go, 2.8. Let's do that again. Yep, 2.7. 2.8. So 2.8 is where you need to be. Now once we have that, we can pick out these parts here, and I have a length of this material left now because I have a nice long piece, which means I've got more room to work with rather than trying to work with that small diddy little bit of plastic. I'm just going to go off camera and do the other part, so I end up with this and this, because we have that part as in the diagram, and we just need this part, and this part is currently in there. So bear with me a second. So I have my part out of my lens, and we want the silver side, which is this painted side, to be down so it's as close to the LED as possible. Now what I didn't mention to you on the last part is what I did do is get my blade and literally get that a wipe so it's a bit cleaner. I got this and just run it down here. I don't know if you can see, there is a little bit of build-up material just at the bottom here. I don't know if you saw a bit fly off there. So using the square part of the blade, I'm going to run that up to the top and just give it a little bit of a push. Again, using the square part down to there, because we don't want to use the cutting edge of the blade because it will just cut through and make a V. And what we're trying to do is clean this out, so we end up with a nice clean square edge. Now mind your fingers. So now we hopefully have that a bit clearer. We get my piece of plastic with the chamfered edges, and I have just tried it and I think it's still a little bit too flat. So we're just using the blade as a scraper, basically scrape along. Let's get to turn over. You can see if the plastic is shiny, I don't know if you can see this in the picture, then you haven't scraped it. So when you're scraping it, scrape the shine off. And if you end up with some material, then you know you've certainly removed some. So as I said, we want the silver side down, so we want this to go in here, into here. With my little 45 degrees cut off, I'm hoping we will eventually, I nearly had it then, don't know if you can see, I can get one half in and then the other half in, but it's just not going through the diffuser. Now you want to try and push on the back of the diffuser as best you can. You don't want to push from the sides because there's a cut for the middle, it could snap in half. Yeah, we don't want it to poke through because this part needs to align flat with the other part, but we do want it to go through the plastic. So I don't know if you can see that the black shadow inside, there you go, I think that's quite a good picture, has gone all the way through. And again, we want to make sure it's nice and parallel. This edge is 90 degrees to this edge, so nice and straight. We know that we need to cut it same as the last one, about 2.9, 2.8, 2.9. So what we will do is we'll go for a good conservative, probably 4 mil. Because this has got slightly higher shoulders, what I will do is get my little edge cutters. So we want same amount as that, basically. That looks pretty good. So to keep hold of this plastic for the other lens, because we've got to repeat this process. So we should end up with that and that. Now we can compare them. If they line up with each other, I think this one is slightly longer. Again, this has got a rounded edge here, so the rounded edge needs to go around there, so this needs to pop in this way. So that needs to go in here through that hole. Now that's not quite going through there. So what I'm going to do is, I think this is a little long, is I'm going to literally snip off that much. But also what I'm going to do while I have them in my hand is just very slightly cut a little 45 on the end of those, because it just needs to drop down between the LEDs to separate the lights between the two of them. We have a little groove in the back of the lens which the plastic is not quite up to, so what we can do is stick our blade into there for a minute and use this to line that up. So I don't know if you can see now, that's dropping in place a lot better than it was before. There you go. A little bit of pressure, and that's gone all the way down, dropped down between the hole, and hopefully be down between the two LEDs. Again, this part needs to go in. This only goes in one way. It does have a, well, I think where they're laser cut or whatever they're cut, or stamped, or probably laser cut, they have a slight curved edge to them, so this part again will only go in one way. So we grab that and we pop it in, and if it drops in nicely without too much persuasion, it's the right way around. If it's not, it won't. So let's just try it the other way, make sure we get the curve to the outside. Now that's definitely a lot tighter that way, so we were correct on that way around. So you want to be able to give these a little bit of a push. You want them to be a nice snug fit, but you don't want to be forcing them. And again, this will fit in that way around or that way around, but we want it to be silver side down so that the diffuser is close to the lens as possible. Now if I give that a nice press, not too much pressure, we have a part in there. We now have the next part which drops in here. So now we have that. The other part is relatively easy. So since we used this one, we're going to use this one, and you can see where they've been cut with a laser, there is a slight chamfer to them here. You'll notice it more when you see it in your hand rather than on my camera. So what we can do is let's peel this plastic from here, peel the sellotape from here, because we want that part and that part. You can see they don't really want to go out that way, so they've been cut from this side. But if I push them this way, they will come out a bit easier. They are quite a tight fit. We don't want to scratch the fronts, but just a little push there. Need to keep that for there. So again, now these are on the table, you'll see, get rid of that, they taper down that way a little bit. So this is like the flat edge and this is slightly rounded. So we have a smaller one which will drop in there. And say if it was wrong, it wouldn't drop in. Yeah, I don't know if you see when that popped in, it actually had a little burr on the end of it. It was a little bit, almost like little nubs you trim off when you're making your kits on there. So again, this chamfers this way, so that there should pop into there, and they should just drop in nice and snug. Like that. Now, again, being as we've used this part and this part, we will use this one here. And they do have, I don't know if it's just where they've been moulded, but there is a slight curve to this. And you can see that on the camera. If I hold it against the camera, against that line below, there is a slight curve. And again, this is the painted side, this is the clear side, so we want the painted side to go down here, so that when we put this in place, glue this in place, he will live in here. Now these, the reason they've been cut this way is the original Tama part, you know, again has a slight bevel on it. This part will only fit in from behind, you can't get it in from the front. So you need to be able to put that in here and give that a nice press into place to locate it. So now we have that. We can put that on here. The original Tamiya dots line up with there, and that part lines up with there. So we have a diffuser line between this part and this part. So I think what actually happens is so we will get them powered up and we'll try them connected either to a test rig or to my SFR1. That diffuser we put was between here and here, so I think you've got one part pulse of an indicator and another part, which is why I'm saying if there's a bleed between those two chambers, it doesn't matter because they're actually part of the same light element. So you get a bump, 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 on, off, on, off, or on, off. This is one LED, that's the reverse, and this is two separate LEDs, but because they actually function as the same unit, there's two in it, and then there's two that separate in here. But if you can see that these parts here, these dots here, are curved to the symbols of these dots, so I'm not sure if they actually get part of the turn signal or not. But with a bit of glue and that in place, that is that. And we have that now to mount to our truck. Sorry the video ran on and took long, but as I say, I've never done it before, so we were doing it together, and we're all good. So we just need to rinse and repeat for the other side, and we will have two to fit. So I shall do that, and hopefully in my next video I shall be able to show you them working. And a little bit of cement on there. I may even use some plastic weld. The plastic weld can fog plastic as it dries, so I may just use the poly which stays clear. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you soon.